that's a startup culture?
So I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I'm actually giving a talk to Google Ventures portfolio companies about this. And I have a big pet peeve, which is that people say like, our startup culture is work hard and play hard. And it's all about the people and our customers and the shareholders.
Did they photocopy that?
All this right, exactly. It's the same as like every major corporation, and it doesn't say anything. I'm a big believer that startup culture is not what makes you great, it's what makes you different. And that your culture comes from when you take one of these balances, like work-life balance, and you say, nope, we're not balancing. We are going all the way one way or the other. So in town, we've got like Jackson Fish Market, where the entire company takes 6 weeks off in the middle of summer. That's culture. And you've got like the investment banking firms, and where they work like 95 hours. And that's like, that defines a culture, for better or for worse.
The Zynga culture.
Yep, yep. So I'm a big believer that culture is all about taking things, whether good or bad, to extremes and then running with the company that comes out of it.
So how did you apply that for what you guys did at SparkBuy? Like,
I didn't, I figured it out way too late.
But I feel like saying that culture is something that makes your company different doesn't quite encompass the reasons why people have culture. It is not for the sake of being different, right? That's an outcome of having a perspective. Yeah. Like a culture is how you operate against the world, right? Yeah. Like the world will throw things at you that you can't control, that you can't understand, and having a good culture allows you to operate more efficiently because no one has to ask the question, what do we do now, right?
I think Facebook's famous statement of culture makes it really clear, the mirror. Move fast and break things. And you can't say we're going to move fast and not also commit to breaking things.
Do you think there's a universal piece of culture that's necessary for success for a tech company? Like, is there something that works across, or is it different for every single tech company?
For internet, so yeah. Culture is a set of trade-offs. Having a startup culture, and by saying you do X over Y, means you are trading specific values because you want to fit your lifestyle or your mission or your market or your product or your customers better.
Where everybody else is seeking balance, you are going to take the compromise that comes with it.
Is anyone here seeking balance? I'm not.
Like, no, well, so as a simple example, lots of startups are seeking balance between, say, like revenue and growth, or they're seeking balance between employee happiness and investor happiness, or you know, like that's a good one, employee happiness and business success.
Well, but they're not necessarily like, in conflict.
Sometimes they are. If you invest in your employees to the extent that it actually is at risk of damaging your business, that's culture.
I think 6 weeks off in the summer is a major cultural statement that not every VC is going to.
And that company makes could easily juice their revenue dramatically. They wouldn't have any problem bring great people in there. But that's a piece of their culture. And I would argue that in the long haul, it probably makes them better because they have a strong culture. But it's a very long horizon that you have to take to see something like that pay off. Because
but all of us are CEOs or founders. And assuming the great UX guy or developer guy would look at each one of our companies and say, independent of the content area, which they may like or dislike, but outside of that, the only thing they're judging from is the culture that we've built or the people we are. Right? They're like, okay, I want to work on this thing or that thing, but take that aside. And like that's an important thing, and that we should be able to, a person should be able to walk in and say like, I like that particular part of this particular company and I want to go work there because fill in the blank.
Yeah.
You can see the ones that just recently went public, you know, one gaming company in particular. You can read them in the blogs and so forth about how awful it is to work there. And there's a lot of stories that may or may not be true, but when there's smoke, there's probably a fire there. But so if you were to talk about culture for a company in terms of if you're going to judge it by whether or not the employees are happy or not, I would say they were grayed out as an F, but in terms of going public and making their investors a lot of money and its CEO a lot of money, it was an A.
But they had an effective culture.
The culture in that company was about money.
That speaks to more of the argument that Dan's making, which is what makes you different. What are you valuing X over Y, rather than to say that that is a bad culture? I know plenty of people think, oh, we're very happy doing what they do, and they'll tell you that the people who left, like, look, we're a big company, somebody's upset. People don't leave companies because of the company, they leave companies because of the manager, right? Like that's an axiom I've heard over and over again. I don't know that you can say that's a bad culture.
You have to be objective about it. So Like I would say it's bad on a couple of fronts. It might be good because they actually accomplish their goals of going public and so forth. They lost phenomenal talent.
Yeah. Culture is about trade-offs, and in their case, the trade-off is really obvious and clear. If you talk to Rand Fishkin, who's one of the people who's probably most passionate about company culture, and is vocal and talks about what it's like, and it sounds like motherhood and apple pie, transparency, accountability. Yeah, he pays for it every day, and so he loses people because they learn things about the company that terrify them. People start talking about the company in hushed whispers and freak themselves out and leave. People know too much about what each other are doing and wind up with jealousy and this and that. And it is a brilliant, amazing company that's incredibly effective. And I think it's hugely net positive, but it's not free.
But isn't that just your point you made earlier, which is for something which is, this is our culture. Like in our case with engineering led, ship every 2 weeks. Like that was part of our culture. That means that some people are just like, that doesn't work for me. Yeah. And I thought it might work for me. It just doesn't work for me.
You guys are all talking about culture as a kind of designed artifact with trade-offs, and people are conscious of it. My sense is that often the founder, particularly if he's a strong person, whether it's Pincus or Zuckerberg or Gates or whomever, has a tremendous impact on the culture, and it stays even when the person is when it's a big company. Like if you look at Google and the way they relate to universities, and you look at Twitter and the way they relate to universities, why is that so different? Why has Google embraced them, embraced PhDs, embraced university relations, and Twitter couldn't care less? I'm not sure that culture and aspects of it are so rational and measured as much as big aspects of it just come from the founder.
Okay, so how do you reconcile culture between an adult serial entrepreneur who's got a full-time professorship and 4 college grads? How do you make that work?
Yes, or how do you make that work?
Well, funny you should mention that. In general, for me personally, because the companies I've founded, I've never been at the helm because I'm a lousy CEO. I'm a lousy manager, let alone CEO, and I have just huge homage for the skill sets that require running something like that. And so from the get-go, it's not having control, right? So the thing that I said from the get-go, and that's why I think I'm a good father to my teenagers, is I'm not going to try to control you, okay? If I want to control it, I need to be there 90 hours a week. I need to be there at midnight if I'm going to try to control it. And even then, I don't think it's going to work. So if I'm not there every minute, I'm not going to try to control you. I'm going to be a resource. I'm going to give you what I can. I'm going to argue passionately for what I believe in. But at the end of the day, it's the decision of the people who are there full time. And thankfully for Decide, the folks were young enough and open enough that more times than not, we came to a meeting of minds. But I've been overruled. I've been overruled by co-founders. I've been overruled by CEOs. I've been overruled by VPs of engineering. I mean, you look at the tread marks on my back. It's like I've got all the things. But it works. It works. And the one thing I do feel passionate about is getting those people to be great. So not agree with me, but every person who's stepped on my back, on my face, on my head, has been somebody I have tremendous respect for.
I was talking to a sculptor, and they were mentioning a quote, and I think it's like a Da Vinci quote, and I'm not exactly sure, but they said, when do you know, when you're sculpting David, right? When do you know it's done? When do you know that you have finished the job? And they said, when there's nothing else left to remove, right? So they could take a block of marble, and they kept on removing and removing and removing until it wasn't that they were creating something, it was just they're removing stuff that was unnecessary. And I feel like, in many ways, I think you're kind of right, that you don't ever get to really shape the culture. You don't actually get to build a culture. You get to kind of mold it and shape it. You put your perspective on it. But in many cases, when I'm trying to shape the culture of my company, I'm removing the things I don't like. I can't really add anything. I can try, but it won't take. Yeah, and you hear this from your non-entrepreneur friends all the time, which is like, can't you make them do that? And you're just, can't you make them do that? And you're just like, oh God.
Yeah, it's like that line from the poem, or the prophet, your children are not your children, and your employees are not your employees.
Right.
Especially in the climate where if they don't like it, they're gone.
And that's the right kind of people you want, right? Is you want people that have their own ideas that aren't like, well, what do we do? Yeah. You're like, no, do what you think is right. Yeah. Do what you think the business needs, the culture needs, the people who work here, do what you think needs. And that's, if you're successful, that's the culture. Whatever the answer to that is, people generally make the right choice, or they make the wrong choice, and then you remove that.
That's right. People have told me about how the internet makes everything meritocratic and it's not about who you know, and I'm like, bullshit. Bullshit. It will always be about who you know. It's just that the access to the club is more meritocratic.